Okay, we're at the Imagine Books in Weymouth again for an exclusive author interview, and I'm talking to Kip Berry, the author of the Stonewylde series. So it's good to be here. So could you describe the Stonewylde universe really for my viewers?
Yes, it's very localised. It's actually a community in Dorset, an imaginary community, and it's set behind high boundary walls, and the community are cut off from the outside world. And I was inspired by the Drax estate at Charborough Park, where there's a high wall, and that's what made me think of the idea. So it's very much a within boundaries universe.
Right, and they're all local characters. Can you describe some of them? The sort of leading proponents, really.
Yes, they're not real local characters. Obviously, they're fictional.
Yeah.
The estate is run when you begin Stonewylde, the first book, Magus of Stonewylde. It's run by the Magus, who is the leader of the community, and he's a very charismatic, gorgeous, handsome dreamboat of a man, and he runs the community from the hall, which is a sort of stately home, and he's joined there with members of his extended family, and basically they're called the hall folk, and they're mostly blonde haired, and the rest of the community lives in the village on the estate, and they're darker haired, and it's run almost on feudal lines. Although it's a contemporary series, the way that the Magus runs the community is like a feudal society.
Right, and it's the sort of adventures that spin off from the dichotomy between the blonde-haired and the dark-haired.
Yes, sort of. It's there's a young girl called Sylvie, and the first book starts off with her in a hospital bed. She's very, very ill. She's 14 years old. She's very thin, and she's allergic to lots of things. She has eczema and all sorts of food allergies, and she's taken down with her mother, Miranda. They're taken to Stonewylde, so they enter the gates and they go inside, which is very unusual. They don't realise quite how unusual. And she's taken there for healing, because this place there are standing stones, and there are very sacred places within Stonewylde. The people who live there haven't forgotten the old ways, and they still know how to draw on the earth magic. So Sylvie's taken there for healing, and the story really comes from what happens while she's there. She meets a young boy called Yule, who's a villager, but she has blonde hair, and she lives up in the hall with the hall folk, and so of course she's forbidden from having any kind of friendship with this lowly villager, and he's a very gorgeous young chap, a bit like a young Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights, that sort of figure, and their friendship develops, and the 5 books really follow their story as they grow up into adulthood.
Where did you said you got the idea from the Drax estate?
Yes.
How long ago? It must have taken
years
quite a
ago,
while.
Back in the 90s. I lived in Dorset. I moved here in 1980, so a long time ago. And I used to drive past, as we all do, every so often you drive past that long wall. And every time I drove past, I used to think about what could be behind there. And I used to imagine, and I used to think, actually, no one would ever know there could be anything going on there. And that's really what fired my imagination.
Right. I've been past that many times, and it's got the deer,
five-legged stag.
The five-legged stag on there, and I tell people they don't believe me,
yes.
but it's true.
Do you know why there's a five-legged stag?
I don't know.
Apparently, one of the Lord Drax who used to live there, going back a long time, could see that there was a long drive from the house going down to that gate with the stag, and from his view he could only see 3 legs on it because of the perspective.
Right.
So he had them apparently add an extra leg so that he could see 4 legs, which resulted obviously in 5 legs.
Yes. Yeah. So, if people wanted to buy the book, when people want to buy the book, where would be the best place to buy it?
Imagine Books would be a very good place to come to.
Of course.
But actually the books, I'm published by Orion, who are a major publisher, and they're available in all bookshops and online. I
heard you mention earlier on that you self-published the first ones?
Yes, the first 3 books I self-published.
The first 3?
Yes.
How was that? Was that an interesting process?
Yes, it was. This was back in 2005 when I first started. I set up my own little publishing company and published the first 3 books, and they did very, very well. And then I managed to secure a literary agent and a big publishing deal. So all the books were then republished with new covers.
Right. And how are the sales going? Have you had sales?
Very well. Yes.
England, worldwide?
Yes, worldwide. A friend came back recently from New Zealand and he'd seen them in the airport there, and that was very exciting to hear that.
Wow.
So, yes, and America.
So if people wanted to buy a signed copy of the books, could they do that at the moment?
Usually when I've done a book signing, I leave some signed copies behind. So
Right.
anywhere where I've been, particularly Imagine Books would be a good place to go. But also for my website, I do book plates. So they can buy a book plate and stick it into their book.
Anything else you want to say before we
finish
the interview?
My books, the covers make the books
They
look like
are
fantasy.
extraordinary. Yes, they are wonderful.
They're very exciting covers, but they don't really reflect the content, I don't think. Because lots of people think they're fantasy,
Right.
and they're not really. They're quite realistic. Obviously, there's a fantastical element to them. So all I would say is if you don't normally like fantasy, please don't feel that these are not for you, because they're a story about life, really, and relationships, and they're very exciting as well.
Okay.
People get very gripped. It's a big following.
Good. Have you? Do you know how many people are fans? Have you got any idea?
Thousands. I don't
Thousands.
know. Yeah, I mean, we have our own social network, and we have a lot of people on that. But yeah, there's a lot of people.
Okay. Well, I hope more people buy the books and more people join
Stonewylde.
the social network. The
Yes.
Stonewylde social network.
Yes. Thank you. And obviously stonewylde.com is our website, so
Right.
have a look on stonewylde.com. It's got details of everything on there.
Okay, I'll put a link to the website from the YouTube page.
That's lovely. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks for the interview. Thank you.